you came back. Good for you. Have a cookie. Grammar Granny is so glad to see you again. Let's finish up with our talk about the 8 parts of speech. What do you remember about adjectives? If you remember they modify nouns, have a cookie. Adjectives describe and give more information about nouns. Can you think of some examples? Little kiddos use adjectives from early on as soon as they start putting words together. Adjectives are words like pretty, dirty, soft, and big, and they're often some of the first words kiddies say. It's good to know which adjectives show up early in kids' speech so we can teach these words to kiddos with language disorders and give them more to say about the words they have. You might remember that adverbs modify verbs, but adverbs are really handier than that. They can also say more about adjectives and other adverbs, like when we say, Taylor Swift is really rich, or Usain Bolt runs very fast. Adverbs usually add meaning about place, time, circumstances, manner, cause, or degree, and stuff like that. Now, conjunctions. I wonder how many of you remember the song about conjunctions from Schoolhouse Rock. You do? Have a cookie. Conjunctions are like little hooks that connect words and phrases, and clauses too. We'll get to what clauses and phrases are later, my dears. Can you think of a few conjunctions? And, but, or. Yes. And there are others, like because, so, when, and lots of others. When you see 2 words or groups of words connected in a sentence, it's the conjunction that does the connecting. Now, let's finish up talking about our pesky parts of speech. Prepositions are those little words that team up to expand the meaning in a sentence. So you could say, I learned grammar, but you could say more by adding some prepositions and the phrases that go along with them. You could say, I learned grammar in the 7th grade. Or I learned grammar before I took the SATs. Or I learned grammar with help from the librarian. Or I learned grammar by sitting next to the spelling bee champ. See how many prepositions you can think of. Then see how many of the prepositions listed on slide 4 you could name. Prepositions introduce prepositional phrases, which are groups of words that go along with them to fill out the meaning in sentences. Usually, the rest of the prepositional phrase includes a noun and some other words that go along with it. So a prepositional phrase has 2 parts. We can write that the fancy way by saying a prepositional phrase equals a preposition plus a noun phrase. If you ever diagrammed sentences in school, now Grammar Granny knows most of you didn't since people think that's very old-fashioned now, but Grammar Granny still likes it. Anyway, if you did, you might remember learning to diagram a preposition like what you see on the screen, where the prepositional phrase is next to the spelling bee champ. Anyway, Grammar Granny's not going to give in to her urge to teach you how to diagram sentences, because you'd probably never come back and see me again if I did. But the idea is that a prepositional phrase has 2 parts. The preposition, which is usually a word or 2, like maybe next to, and the noun phrase that follows the preposition. It'll help if you can remember what a prepositional phrase is, because we'll talk about other kinds of phrases or groups of words that go together to form parts of sentences. We'll do that later on, so that's something you can all look forward to. Now, we've talked about 7 different parts of speech. Remember I said there were 8 of them? Well, Grammar Granny has to fess up. She didn't quite tell the truth. There are 8 parts of speech, but like most things in life, there are disagreements about which is the 8th part. Some people say it's the interjection. Those are those little words we throw into sentences. Well, gosh, we do it all the time, like when we say well or gosh. Jiminy cricket, I'll bet even you young folks do it now and then. That was another one. one of Grammar Granny's old favorites. But we don't need to spend a lot of time on those because we don't often need to help people learn or relearn them. So let's move on to the other eighth part of speech, determiners. Now, some people would call determiners adjectives and not a separate part of speech all to themselves. But when we're working with people who have trouble learning or relearning their language, this bunch of words is often particularly hard for them. So I think it makes sense for us to focus on them as their own group. So, here we go. There are lots of different kinds of determiners. There's definite and indefinite articles. That's a, an, and the, my dears. A and an are called the indefinite articles. We use them when we're introducing something new to the conversation. So if I'm telling you about my birthday party, Grammar Granny doesn't usually talk about her birthdays because she's had so many of them they all blur together. But if I did, I might say, they made me a cake. I'd say, because we hadn't mentioned anything about cake before, so I would use an indefinite pronoun. But if I went on to say, the cake was chocolate, my favorite, I'd change over to the, because we have talked about the cake before, and I want you to know that I'm talking about the same cake I mentioned already. So I use the definite article. We make this change because as we talk with people, we need to help them look. We make this change because as we talk with people, we need to help them keep track of what information is already given in the conversation or the discourse, if you want to talk fancy. So they need to recall what we've told them before and bring it to the front of their mind. Some folks call this foregrounding. Then we need to help them figure out what's new that we haven't heard before and have to get a mental picture of for the first time. We use different little language tricks in this way all the time to help people we talk with manage all the mental gymnastics they have to do to understand and make sense of conversations. Using definite and indefinite articles correctly in this way is one of these tricks that help listeners handle given and new information. It's a hard thing for little ones to learn, and it takes them into the school years to get it all straight. It's often hard for people who lose language later in life, too. That's why it's important for us to understand how these articles work. Demonstratives are another kind of determiner. Demonstratives are this, that, these, and those. They act like pointers to the nouns they go with. But they're a special kind of pointer, and there's another fancy word for it, deixis. Deictic expressions are words that change their meaning depending on the point of view of the speaker. Let's take this and that. Both words are pointers, but this points to something that's near the speaker, while that points to something farther away. Here is where I am. This computer I'm talking to is this for me, but it's that computer for you. Which is this and which is that depends on who's talking. To you, my computer would be that computer and yours would be this one. There are lots of deictic pairs of words, and not all of them are demonstratives. Just a few examples are I and you. I's not any particular person, it's just the one who's talking, and you is the one who's listening. Right now, I'm talking and you're listening, but if you turn me off, Grammar Granny knows you would never do that. But if you turned me off to tell your roommate, I'm tired of this, now the I is you. Here and there is another one. It's a lot like this and that. Here is near the speaker and there is farther away. Bring and take is another pair. Bringing is carrying something closer to the speaker, and taking it is moving it farther away. Come and go is the same idea. Come means moving towards the speaker, and go means moving away. Now, as you might imagine, deixis is hard to learn, and typically developing kids don't get it all straight until early school age. But kids with language problems take much longer to figure it all out, sometimes until age 10 or so, and they may need our help to learn these forms in order to get their messages across clearly and to understand others. Possessive determiners, his, hers, my, yours, etc., are forms of pronouns used to talk about ownership. Common nouns usually use an apostrophe S ending for this, but pronouns have special forms. Can you think of any more examples? See how many you can write down. Did you think of yours, mine, their, theirs, its, hour and hours? Then have a cookie. Quantifiers are another type of determiner. They're words like many, few, and several. Another type are the cardinal numbers. Those are the counting numbers we use, 1, 2, 3, and so on. And then there are distributive determiners. These are used to refer to members of a group separately rather than all together. So they're words like each, every, either, neither, another, other, or any. And finally, there are the interrogative determiners. Those are WH words like which and what that are used to point to individual items. So for example, we might say these books are for sale. Which one do you want? Where which is an interrogative determiner. Or she works here, but I don't know what job she does. Where what is an interrogative determiner. Well, we did it. We covered the 8 parts of speech, my dears. Have a cookie. And do come back and see Grammar Granny real soon.